changed into her nighttime gear. So, so I was like, all right, how quickly in 5 minutes can I like change diapers, like clean her up, put on the full onesie nighttime garb for her, and she's good now.
All right, we could get started. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to People Power Hour. Again, my name's Terrell McKinney, running for state legislature in District 11. Tonight, we got a special guest, Senator Tony Vargas, who represents Legislative District 7. How you doing, Tony?
How you doing, Terrell? Good. How you doing, everybody?
I'm good. Good to have you on. Before we get too deep into it, for those who may not know who you are, can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, happy to. My name is Senator Tony Vargas. I am a state senator here in Nebraska. I represent District 7 in downtown in South Omaha, and I've been serving in the legislature for the last just going on 4 years now. Quickest 4 years of my life. And previous to that, I'm born and raised in New York. My parents are from Peru, but I'm born and raised in New York. And I was a teacher in New York City, and I've been in the education world for quite a long time, education policy, and moved here so my wife can go to law school at Creighton. And we moved here about 8 years ago. And for the 7 of those last 8 years, I've been in elected office, and started off in the school board, serving with actually Mark Snow and Justin Wayne. And then in 2016 decided to run for the legislature and got elected. And I get to serve, and I'm one of the 49 state senators, and it's the best job I never knew I would be in, and it's taught me a lot. And I'm just really happy to serve in the state of Nebraska, man. It's been a privilege, and it's an honor.
That's great. What got you out of the classroom and into elected office? What pushed you?
So I was in the classroom. I was teaching in Brooklyn. I taught middle school science, and my kids now are adults. They're all in professional lives, but I made the jump primarily from being in the classroom to outside the classroom. And one of the reasons is I wanted to see if I can affect more change. I was one teacher of many in my school, and I kept thinking to myself, is there a way to continue to improve the system, the education system, by reaching more teachers? And so I started doing coaching and developing of teachers in New York City, and then started working with some principals and started working with some school and system leaders. And I realized I really liked a little bit more of this sort of change management of, if I can train and develop and help the leadership of other people, and then they go, as they're leading their classrooms, their schools and systems, they can do a lot more if they're reflective leaders, and they work on their mindsets. And I realize I love working with adults. It is hard. Everybody is different, but it's rewarding because people, I know we come with our own baggage and our own experiences, and understanding that helps us become better leaders. And so the jump I made from them working in the education sector after being a teacher, working and coaching teachers and principals and school leaders, was I'd been in Nebraska for about a year, and there was a school board opening. Somebody resigned, and I decided to they were asking for applications for people that care about public education, care about the communities of color, care about equity, have education experience, and that was all me. That was like my background. It was my upbringing and my background, and so I decided to put my name in, and I specifically made the jump because I thought it's probably a good thing if some of our elected leaders on the school board, and apparently my daughter agrees, is having people that are that were directly had experience in the classroom, have experience working in the sector in different ways. And so I made the leap, and I didn't do it for politics. It was more because I thought policy, but these are political positions. The politics does play a role. So, but
Right.
I've loved it. Yeah.
That's kind of the reason I decided to run. I was doing a lot of organizing in the community, and I kind of just got to a point to where, do I want to be outside the door knocking on the door, or can I some way get inside the door so I don't have to keep knocking? And so the voices that I'm trying to represent are heard inside those rooms. So I was like, why not just run for office? What do I have to lose? So that's partly why I decided to run.
You make a good point, and I'll just say this: one of the hardest things that I had to set aside was I was an organizer too. I was organizing within my community. I was talking to teachers and parents and community members, and I did that with other teachers. It became natural. It was more like community engagement. It's what I think is a default of what teachers should do, but in this sense, people running for the legislature. You get the opportunity, you actually have a seat at the table. You actually get a vote, and it is really unique. So you get to enact that kind of change while actually being in the seat that can make some of that change. So it's a great, I love being in this role.
So the 2020 session just ended, and I've tried to watch as much as I can every day. I know you guys were having a lot of heated discussions every day. Every time I was watching, it was usually a heated discussion about something. How did you think it went?
I mean, you said it. It was hard. I won't lie. We in the legislature, we're just so different, and usually those differences can actually help us come together in some ways. On different issues, we find common ground. And I think this was a harder session because COVID-19 really interrupted our work. And I say that as a matter of fact, not as I feel interrupted by COVID-19. It's the right thing that we did is stop doing lawmaking when we're in a pandemic. It's irresponsible for us to try to think we can do anything else. And the only reason we came back is because we have to finish in this year. So we have to finish this year. And so it was, you use the word heated, and I think it was a little bit heated. We had disagreements on big issues. We had some big big policy disagreements on things that I think can be wedge issues. And I'm never a huge fan when we have wedge issue discussions. And it doesn't feel like the issue is about solving the problem. Sometimes it feels like the issue is more to really create a wedge between us politically. And 95% of the bills that we discuss are not bills where we might disagree on the policy, but we don't necessarily have an ideological stance on it. That's my thought. And so it was a hard session because we didn't have as much time. Well, we had the same 60 days that we normally have for the most part, but it felt so quick the last 17 days. There were so many big proposals and bills that we weren't able to finish or complete. So we came back with 17 days, which is not a lot of time. And that made it, I think, a little bit more heated. But I'm happy to say at least we finished accomplishing some things that different people cared about, different constituencies. We left saying goodbye to 6 senators, and that's always hard. It's just hard. And we had some good discussions there were some things that we didn't get to finish, or things that I don't think we did as right as we possibly could. But at the end of the day, um, I'm happy that we did get some work done. And next year in January, when we have a whole new slate of candidates, and a whole new slate of senators, there's even more work done. And that could be you, Terrell, obviously. But we, the legislature is what it is because of the people that are in it. And I think it was hard time around because we did not have as much time to remind ourselves, each person who they are, what they care for, who their constituency is, and put us in a corner. It put us in a corner this time around. But we got a new session in January. So
to go back a little, if you could go back in time, what would you say to your first year senator self now?
First year senator self. Ooh. One, I would say spend the majority of the beginning of your time learning as much as you possibly can about process. I think sometimes we think we have to be content experts, policy experts first, and that's not the case. There's enough people that have knowledge about childcare, early education, criminal justice, tax reform, transportation. There are people that have that knowledge. The real, I think, importance is understanding how the system works and how to navigate it. So understanding the system also means knowing and understanding the people. This is our public agencies and our departments, the people that are running them. What are the existing infrastructure and plans that they have? I think that's one thing that I would have told myself, because sometimes we assume that something is inherently already broken or it's already been fixed. And usually I'm surprised by what has and has not been done for things. So that's something I would tell myself. I would also tell myself, spend more time listening, listening to my colleagues, listening to on the front end what they care about, doing more research to learn what bills they brought and why they brought them. Not what is written on the one line that says what the bill is, but why they cared about that issue. And then I would also tell myself to spend more time getting to know the communities that are outside of your district. We represent a district, and that's great, but and I love my district. But to be a better legislator means putting myself out there and learning about the state, because I'm going to be voting on issues that go beyond District 7, go beyond downtown and South Omaha, go beyond Omaha. And it's a lot easier to make that decision when I understand what people's lives look like in Crete, or what they look like in Lexington, you name it. But so those are three things I would definitely tell myself, or tell anybody that's a first year legislator, to take those things into perspective.
What were some bills that you were able to get passed this session?
We have my team, and I say we a lot, but I got an amazing team. I got two people that help me with everything. One, I call her like my sort of chief of staff, legislative chief of staff. That is Meg Mandy. She is she's amazing. She's fantastic, and she's been with me since the beginning of all this. And then Christy Prentice. She is my office manager, administrative assistant, and she understands and anticipates what my vision is for trying to communicate things out to the social media, to different networks, and trying to engage new people. Together, we always put out a lot of bills every year. That's not the goal. It's just that I usually I keep continuing to identify more problems and issues, and because the legislature is the way it is, we can introduce as many bills, and it's really incumbent upon us to try to push them forward. Nothing's a guarantee. All the guarantee is that my bill is going to get a hearing. There's no guarantee that the bill is going to make it to the floor. That's all on me and my office. So we introduced, at least 20 bills this last session, and this year, and then last year, we probably the legislature passed about close to 19 of our bills, so close to about half, and bills that are, there's a lot of stuff that I'm proud of, and I'm trying to pull a few of them up right now. So I'll tell you a few that passed this year that make me honestly make me excited. So the first here is so I'm the chair of the planning committee, which is basically a legislative planning committee where we do strategic planning for the state of Nebraska. And housing in our communities is always an issue. I've been working on affordable housing in the legislature for the first couple of years, and so has Senator Wayne. And we're going to continue to work on affordable housing. What we found is affordable housing is one thing that we need to work on, but the other thing we need to work on is middle income or workforce housing. A prime example is even in my community. If you look around, there might be the development of a new condo. Condos are going for like $300,000, $250,000 to $300,000, and they're next to other homes that are around $80,000. And so that presents a problem for the community. Those are really stark contrasts in terms of home value, and it also means that where are people that are teachers, firefighters, paraprofessionals that are nurses, where are they supposed to be able to live if they want to live in my community? Yes, honey. And so we looked at what an existing program how is working, and so rural Nebraska has a rural workforce housing program, and that program has had $8 million infused through a matching grant program, and has built so many different projects that are creating middle income workforce housing in communities that normally don't have as much infrastructure development. And we wanted to do the same thing. And so now, pending everything going into effect here soon, this bill is a $10 million investment in middle income workforce housing in qualified census tracts, which have higher underemployment and higher poverty. And that's so that we can build housing in the areas where we are struggling, and we need a little bit more of that diversity. And I don't want people looking at blighted areas as opportunities to simply build, condos or rental properties, because as far these units also have to be owner occupied units that are developed, because the only way that, at least for me, my parents came to this country, and the first thing that got them one step closer to the American dream was eventually saving enough money to then buy a home. And owning a home is equity. And once you have that equity, you get to use that in so many different good ways. And so that's one way why we wanted to do this bill. So that was a big win. And a huge shout out to Senator Wayne, because he was a champion with making sure and calling out some of the hypocrisy with not pushing forward something like this. There's no way I could have done it without him, and it's a big win for both of our districts. A couple of the bills that were important this last year. I serve on appropriations, which is our budget committee, and I am always trying to look to prioritize where we invest as a state in things that are going to help people and are going to help our most vulnerable. And so we introduced increased funding for certain departments or agencies that in my opinion, are needed to then help, working families. And so one of those was our federally qualified health centers. So obviously Charles Drew is, in the north side of Omaha, and I got One World in mind. I introduced a bill that would increase the funding to our FQHCs across the state. So we got a $500,000 increase in the funding at the state level for them. I also introduced a bill that was going to, and I thought about this before the pandemic happened, but I introduced a bill to then add money and infrastructure money, funding to our public health departments across the state, because I felt like eventually our public health departments are reactive entities. They're waiting and they're working on preventative education. But when we're in a period of pandemic like this, they are all hands on deck. And so it felt more important that we try to do some funding to the public health departments so that they can improve their own teams and infrastructure to then meet the needs of our communities. Those are three things that I'm particularly proud of right now. And the fourth one, which is a little bit of a unique one, is my FAFSA bill. Every single student in the state of Nebraska and that goes to a public school will be required to complete the FAFSA. Now, here's the caveat. If they don't want to complete the FAFSA, if a parent or guardian decides they don't want to have their student, all they have to do is opt out and complete a form. But what we're doing is we are asking parents or guardians to opt out, and then by opting out, they're taking the decision to say, I do not want to apply for FAFSA, knowing that there could be some federal Pell Grants or low interest loans that I could take advantage of. And so every year there's about $2.1 billion in federal Pell Grants, just grants, not even loans, that is left on the table by people that are eligible for them.
Wow.
Every year. And these are students that we want to go to community college. We want them to go to trade schools. We want them to go to four-year colleges. And we can be putting $6,000, $6,500, in their hands to then pay for a class or two. That goes a long way. But every year, kids don't apply. And so by doing this, Louisiana was the first state. They did it through the State Board of Ed. And in 1 year, they saw 25% plus percentage in FAFSA completion. And they saw increases in high school graduation, college going, and post-secondary education going for all Latinos, African Americans, people of color. And so the next state that did this was Texas. The next one was Illinois. And pending everything going well, it got voted in final reading yesterday. We are the next state. And I just hope that gets upheld, and we can put that in place by the end of the year.
That's good. I know, just thinking back to when I was in high school and when I did my FAFSA, I don't think I did it until maybe a couple months before graduation. And I was an athlete, and I had aspirations to go to school after high school, but I don't recall anybody coming to me prior to maybe a few months before graduation saying, hey, you need to fill this out. So I know there's a lot of first generation college students that without this probably just miss out, like I did too, if nobody, because I think the resources are there. I think sometimes the lines of communication drops off a lot of times in our schools, and that's how it happens.
Yeah, I think that is a big part. That's actually the number one reason that students said that they didn't complete the FAFSA, is because they didn't know about it, or they didn't know certain aspects about it. And I think that's one of the issues. And so this is a very creative way of sort of flipping the script, so that if people are opting out, they're knowingly saying, I don't want to complete the FAFSA, instead of before, which is they didn't really have a reason to know about it and wasn't something important. This is a really creative solution to a problem, because in Nebraska, we only have about, I think it's like 50, 40. We're probably 26th in the country for our FAFSA completion. And we have it's close to 50% still non-completing. Well, no, it's 40% that are not completing the FAFSA in the state. And so we have a huge opportunity, because what happens is that money that isn't new money, it's money that's already budgeted for in the federal government. That money is going to come to Nebraska schools. So if my daughter is filling out the FAFSA and then puts in MCC, Metro Community College, she gets a Pell Grant, then she can go to MCC as long as she qualifies, and they'll get her money to do that. And think about the millions of dollars that we can be fusing into some of our higher education institutions, Creighton, Hastings College, you name it, and so this is I see this as a really big deal that can put money in the hands of the people that we want to get good jobs, and go to good higher education in the state of Nebraska. And then hopefully the end game here is the more people that can better afford higher ed by utilizing, like this passing, these individuals, they're going to have one more step in terms of access to a good job, to self-sufficiency, to entrepreneurship. And it starts with finding what already exists sometimes. And so a lot of people didn't even know that that's how much money is left in DC. Like it shocked me when I first learned how much money that is. I'm like,
I watched the floor debate for this bill, and I was sitting there thinking, I was like, because some senators were arguing against it, and I'm like, is it disconnect? Is it just refusing to have an open mind, or is it politics? What do you think it usually is when something like this that seems super logical gets like the response it gets?
I think this was a legitimate. Some people were on politics, but I think it's a little bit more on ideology. Like, unfortunately, some people see this as a mandate, no matter what, is a bad thing. And some people view that, and they saw this as a mandate with on students and on families, and that it was going to be a burden. And on face value, you could come to that conclusion. We're putting an extra burden on parents and families. However, I love data, and I love making sure that the policy, we don't make assumptions. In Louisiana, when every single student was now required to complete the FAFSA as a graduation requirement, not a single student was held back from graduating because of not fulfilling that FAFSA. What ended up happening is people saw that they had to complete the FAFSA, and they completed it, or they opted out. But most of them completed it because they were like, well, I want more options in front of me. Why wouldn't I complete it? And so that's what I anticipate is going to happen in Nebraska as well. So a lot of the debate was on it being a mandate. Some people said this is about civil liberties, not even civil, just liberties, that families should not be forced to share their financial information with people. And I said, they're not being forced to share their financial information with any entity in Nebraska. But when you apply for the FAFSA, you give your information to the federal government in terms of your data, so that they can qualify whether or not you're going to be able to get a grant or a loan. And that's the end of it. So no information is being shared in the state of Nebraska. It's not like you share information with your school. And so there's just a lot of addressing small issues that people had. People thought it's just a straight up mandate, like you have to do it or you don't graduate. I'm like, no. If I'm a parent and I decide, I don't want my kid to complete the FAFSA, doesn't matter what the reason is, you can do that. You just sign and say, I don't want to complete the FAFSA for my kid. And it's that simple. So I'm like, that's I really saw this as a really creative way to encourage completion for this. And, that it passed, which was the most important thing. And, now I'm going to work on implementation.
Right. And I agree. I think it's a great bill, because just thinking about when I was in high school again, and I remember having friends that weren't necessarily encouraged to finish up school. It was like, I might go to school, I might not, because I'm not going to do nothing after high school. And I think if people are able to see another option and say, hey, you apply for FAFSA, you could access these resources and go to school, I think a lot more of our students be like, okay, that's some motivation for me to complete school, because I could go on and do this. And I like it. I know you were working on some legislation for the meat packers. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, I can speak to that. So so if people don't know this, there's meatpacking plant workers all over the state. They are the hardest hit by the pandemic. Anywhere between 20 to 25% of the cases COVID-19 in the state of Nebraska have been meatpacking plant workers. And that's a lot. That's like 1 in 5, right? So, and then in addition, if you're looking at how this is impacting people of color, specifically the Hispanic Latino population, in the beginning of July, the World Herald had reported that 60% of the COVID-19 cases were Hispanic or Latinos. And so this is hitting people of color, specifically, my brown, my Latino, family and friends and community in the state of Nebraska. And so we saw this, and then we started hearing the stories. We started hearing the stories from workers and the children of workers about just how difficult the circumstances have been. Talking about having a mask that you're wearing all day, and every time you try to touch your mask, like you're bloodying your mask because you're handling raw meat from crowded public spaces where there's not social distancing happening. People being told to not share that they tested positive out of sort of fear of retaliation, because they don't, the industry doesn't want people to know about positive cases. And the list kind of kept going on. And in these facilities, they are close quarters. And seeing the outbreaks of COVID-19 in them, and knowing that they're people of color, we needed to do something. And we've been trying for months to try to do everything we can. And it got to a point where we have to introduce some sort of legislation. And so we introduced an amendment, and we got all the way to a hearing and an amendment voted out of committee, but we ran out of time to actually debate it on the floor. And, it was an important step that we had a public on the record hearing with families and people that have lost loved ones sharing their experiences in the meatpacking plants. And so I was happy that we took steps towards something, but unsatisfied that we didn't actually put into statute protections during a pandemic for our meatpacking plant workers. And so now,
could it have been moved up in some type of way so you guys may be able to debate it?
Unfortunately, the answer is always yes. Within the rules, if you can get enough votes, you can do most anything you want, but you need 25, and in some instances you need 30. But getting that many people to try to fast track something is always a hard sell. And so I didn't have enough votes to. Well, the other part of this is, even if I could, circumventing the rules really is a difficult process. And I think this probably warranted it, but I could not get enough people to help me elevate something beyond and address it immediately. I just couldn't.
Okay. I have a cousin that worked in, I don't know what packing plant he works in, but he was telling me all summer about how like the conditions were, and how they were like going on strikes and things like that, and trying to force the company to pay them more if they gotta work under those conditions. I think they were able to get a couple pay raises just going on strike, and I was like, wow, like it's, and I and to me, with this whole COVID thing has shown, it's like we've neglected individuals that work in meatpacking plants. We've neglected individuals that work at Walmart and all these other places. Now they're essential, And it's like, wow, like we need to do more to assist these individuals, more like, you know what I mean? We need to raise the minimum wage and things like that for these
Oh,
individuals.
oh yeah, no, I don't disagree with you. I will say this, and this is a little bit of a difference. In a period, and normally we need to always focus on raising wages. I just think that in general, because we may have low unemployment and low underemployment, but we are one of the top states in the country for having people working one or more jobs still living in poverty, which means we're clearly not
Right.
our wage and keeping up with the demands for working families. And so that's just a reality that we need to face. But in the middle of a pandemic, what I didn't like about the meatpacking plants is they were increasing wages, and it was incentivizing people to come work. It wasn't necessarily focused on improving all of the safety precautions. And that's the problem. Some of the plants
Right.
were doing some things for safety. Some of them were doing more than others. Some of them were consistency applying it, and others were inconsistently applying it. And so, what an easy way to get around this is pay people more, like hazard pay, right, or incentive pay to come back to work, rather than putting in and spending the money on safety to protect people, because there's 21 deaths that were meatpacking plant workers. There was at least close to 300 hospitals, or no, 250 people that were hospitalized that were meatpacking plant workers across the state. You know, I think we're still live, and I think Terrell might have lost you, and that's okay. He'll come back soon. In the meantime, I'm going to keep floating and talking until Terrell joins us back up. But these meatpacking plant workers, is an ongoing issue. And I'm not going to. The fight doesn't end simply through the legislation. We still have the opportunity to do more in educating the public, like everybody's listening here, about the conditions and the fact that these workers are deemed essential but are not expendable. They are people in our community, and they deserve more protections during this pandemic, and we need to do more for them. So please, if you believe that we can do more and should do more, legislature is out of session. We can't do anything. But what can be done is the governor's office still can do more. It's up to him or the Department of Labor. So please contact them and let them know that you believe, based on whatever perspective or data you want to share, but that please protect our meatpacking plant workers. And so I'll be working on that here for the next several months as well, and just happy that we can educate the community about them. Terrell, you there?
Yeah, I'm here. For some reason, I can't get on.
That's okay. I'm going to assume we're going to because it was kind of on the agenda, a little bit about some more content. So we'll talk a little bit more about some. Somebody that's listening out there, this is okay. I was telling everybody that's listening out there, it's a big deal that Terrell, you do this type of structure, because educating our community about what we're doing in a transparent way is like the other part of our job as being elected officials and being a state senator that people don't know is we don't get paid to do this extra time, or I don't get paid to do this extra time. Nobody tells us that we should do this. It just feels like the right thing to do to educate our community. And so I just appreciate you making this space on Friday night.
Oh, no problem. One of my commitments to running was trying to be as engaged as possible with my community and our communities, because I think that's important. I think a lot of times, and I felt like this just as a community member, my elected officials weren't necessarily engaging us. It was more so waiting for us to engage them. And I think it should be the other way around.
Yeah, no, I hear you. And I agree with that. We just need to get more. We need more and more people elected to have that mindset. And for those that may not be exercising or doing that type of have that mindset or do those types of activities, we need to ask them to do it. Because I also
Right.
think that to some extent, um, I think it's easy for us in elected office to sometimes lose sight of the things that are the most connected to people. And we also need to give the benefit of the doubt that, hey, asking our elected officials to do more of these things is I think a little bit of the grace that we can then apply to. And but then if they don't do it, that's a whole different other story. We got to ask sometimes. But I think that balance is important.
Definitely. I know COVID has affected your family a lot, and I know you lost your father. How are you? I know it's a little personal, but how are you able to deal with that and still go back to the legislature and still do your duties as a senator?
So I will say, as best as I can.
Mhm.
Uh, it is difficult, even I'll hold this picture up, but like people can see that's right over here on this side. This is my dad right there, and this is a picture from when we were actually for my daughter's baptism in New York with my family and my brothers, and there's my mom right over there. My brothers are in the middle over here, closer over here. And anyway, I'll say the hardest part about all this is I we don't really have choices on what happens to us in our lives. Uh, this is something I said I would take on being in this office. Um, well, one thing that I did promise myself that I would do is try to be as vulnerable and strong through this with the public, because if I was not communicating what's happening in my life, I feel like it's very disingenuous to like what I said I was going to do when I was elected. I said I was going to be connected to my community. I thought I was going to be honest, and I thought I was going to be transparent. And I said, and this is a unique circumstance, and it is a personal, and it's hard for me to talk about all the time, but I people are going through this too. There are 150,000 people that have been taken by this virus across the country, and so I feel a little sense of duty to continue to do my job, and um, also be vulnerable and share that it is difficult, and I
Right.
am a human being, but I'm also going to hustle and keep working to then do this job to the best of my ability, and that's the best that I can do.
That's good. I kind of asked that because the world has people on social media have so many theories, and I always try to tell people like whether you think it's a conspiracy or not, this is affecting people, and we should do whatever we can to make sure we're safe, but we're also doing whatever we can as community members to make sure we're not doing anything to harm others. And that's what I try to tell people. I'm like, whether you think it's real or not, it is your opinion, but you can't deny the fact that this is affecting people. And I know the other day you brought that up in the legislature. Like, look, you whatever you just said was kind of irresponsible because you just need to talk to me if you want to if you want to realize if it's real or not.
I so the first thing is, and I have this conversation with my wife and with friends, and I'm like, we go to the doctor because we believe that our primary care physician that is trained and has gone to school for this, and um, they know medicine, and they know anatomy and physiology. So when I'm getting an expert opinion on them, I'm going to listen. and people listen. That's why they go to the doctor. They want to know better. But if we think about our like population health, public health, people, when they hear from infectious disease experts or experts in this field of virology, doctors that are on the front lines, that are in the emergency room, or are public health experts, and they are saying, hey, this is real. And first of all, they don't even question, they don't even say this is real. They're saying there's a pandemic, there's a virus, it is spreading, it spreads this way. It is extremely likely that you may get it if you don't practice these public health practices. And then at the end of the day, we should be listening to these experts. But because it's not individual, so personal individual health, and it's public health, there's people that push back and say, well, it's not, I'm not getting COVID-19, so it must not be real.
Right.
I don't have friends that got COVID-19, so, and that's an inherent problem that we have, that I hope we work on as a community. If the only way that we can make informed decisions to help our fellow neighbors is if we are hurt by the consequences of something, we have those problems with, in a lot of ways, like, police violence in some ways, where people are like, well, I don't see that happening in my community, so I don't think it's real, or I don't think it happens. It must be circumstantial. And we can't have that happen in a period of pandemic like this. So yeah, I got up and I got really frustrated. I think I even said, I was like, that what he said really pissed me off. And it did, because and it was probably like the most diplomatic way I could say I was pissed off, because it's like, what you say, elected officials get up on this mic, and we are not ordained, we are not experts, but we are stewards of truth. And that truth comes from being educated about what's happening. And when we spout things that are untrue or not grounded in science or fact, we're doing a disservice to our community and to our state. And I just could not, and especially because I'm like, you're telling me it's not no bigger than it's not a big deal, it's just like the flu, is irresponsible, it's reckless. And it's, and because it's affecting people that look like you and me, and this is coming from somebody that's a white man, it's even more disrespectful, because I need more people that are not people of color to care about this as much, so that we're trying to slow the spread of the virus as well. So yeah, I'm gonna, it's a hard truth that I have to continue to try to educate my not my colleagues necessarily. I wasn't trying to change Senator Erdman's opinion. He made his opinion. What I was really trying to do was talk to the people in the public listening, so that when they're listening to his rationale and listening to mine, that mine is the one that is grounded in listening to the experts that are the ones preparing for this period of a pandemic. And that's what's more important.
I agree. It's like, am I going to listen to somebody who has this level of knowledge about these type of pandemics, or somebody has spent 30 plus years studying and researching, and you know what I mean? Like it makes no sense to me sometimes. Before we close out, I wanted to talk about the importance of this upcoming election. Ooh. And why individuals in both our communities, because I think our both districts 11 and 7 might be the lowest as far as voter turnout. And can you speak to the importance of voting, and why individuals in our communities especially need to get out or vote by mail?
Yeah. So what you said is important for everybody to know. If you live in District 11 or 7, you are living in one of the lowest voter turnout, the 2 lowest voter turnout districts in the state of Nebraska. When I first ran in 2016, we ran on the idea that it wasn't just about winning, but that we would try to increase voter turnout and civic health. And we did that. We increased voter turnout by about 25% in the district. from the previous 3 elections, and it was a really big deal. So we're not done yet. We're going to continue to do that, and my hope is that we can continue to have an increase in voter turnout. But what I find is, I think the best way I can tell people that are listening is, if every person found their 2 friends or family that are not really engaged locally, and we're not maybe planning to vote, maybe it wasn't on their mind, and spend the time trying to talk to them about an office, one seat, and the value of their vote. Because if every single person listening, if we had 1,000, 2,000 people talk to 2 people each, that exponential, and then those people did the same thing, we wouldn't have an issue with voter turnout. And 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 in a lot of ways, that's what we do during normal times. That's what we do when we knock on doors. We knock on doors. We talk to people, and we're trying to build a connection. And that work cannot you can't make there's no shortcuts to trying to engage somebody and inspiring them to care about the power of their vote. You really can't cut corners. You can cut corners to try to get somebody to not vote for somebody else by doing negative mail. You can cut corners by trying to get somebody to vote for you just so that your name is out there. Like, I can send out 10 mailers with my name, and then people be like, I heard that name a lot. I like that guy. Right? Like, you can do that, but that doesn't increase civic health. That's gaming the system. Increasing civic health is trying to spend, time in the community, working with different entities and organizations, and being accessible when you're not asking people for their vote. Like, the goal is, once if you win, Terrell, and this is for any candidate, once you win in an office, I wish there was more of an emphasis on what you do once you're in there. Because once you're in there, it's not just voting on things. It's not just introducing bills. It's what you do in the community to then keep your ears to the ground and then actually be present. And that's one of the harder parts of this. And I know that because it's a sacrifice, it's time, and but it's needed. And so the value of everybody listening to this, on how you can talk to a couple people and get them to vote, or get them, because the goal isn't to vote, to get them to understand the value of being engaged and the value of maybe an office. They may not even know that OPPD, what they actually are doing and what impact they have in your lives. They may not know how the legislature actually plays a bigger role in your day-to-day, lives in terms of state law. And so educating those people might bring them into the fold. And if we did enough of that, we would be fine. But the hardest part about your district and my district is that when there's not enough people voting, we lose power. The loudest people in the room are typically the ones that get heard. And I hate that. And the same thing goes for voting. The people that vote the most are usually the ones that get heard. It is why, when I was on the school board and we were trying to advocate for improving our schools across through the bond, there were not a lot of my people in my community that were coming to like public comment. But the reason is because they're working. Right. They have lives. They can't just get up and leave their kids. It's not the easiest of things to do for working families. I know. I came from working families, 2 working parents, and so did my wife. And so this, but other people might have the privilege and the ability to come and demand and ask for more things. And so voting is powerful, because if more people in our communities get out and vote, I could tell you, there's going to be people, mayor's office, Congress, all these seats are going to spend more of their time in our districts, because they know that people are going to vote, and that their vote matters. But until we build and change, and you and I and others in the community, those that aren't even running for office too, work to increase that turnout.
Right.
We are at a disadvantage, and so we need to continue to work on that.
Right. And I try to tell people that, because all summer there's been a lot of protests and rallies going on in both our communities. I just try to tell people that the protest can't just stop in the streets. It has to be through a vote by mail ballot. It has to be at the polls. Because we'll be in the same position trying to knock on the door saying we're outraged about this, when the election came up, we could have possibly put somebody in a seat that would have listened. So we have to make sure that the protest doesn't just stop in the streets. It has to continue into voting by mail or into the polls.
One thing I'll say to that, because it's so true, and if right now, this won't happen, but like if there was like some viral sensation that was like, when everybody was doing the ice bucket challenge,
right?
If there was some viral sensation that people like put on their Facebook profile picture, they're like, I'm gonna vote, or like I'm committing, and there's some way to just publicly do that, not just when we're getting close to it, like now. I mean, the public and social pressures of voting help. When people know that other people and their friends are doing it, they do it. I think that's what helped with demonstrations. People came out to demonstrate that have never demonstrated before. I think part of it is they were like, well, I can see people doing it. It's accessible. It's important. I can see the value in it. But we need more people to see that same value in voting. It's such a private thing, voting. But at the same time, just knowing that other people are doing it that you care about, or that you hold in high regard or high esteem is helpful and important. So, yeah, man, but I hear you.
Definitely. How can people reach you?
You can reach me through social media. I try my best to keep up with all of them. There are a lot of platforms. The ones that we mainly use are obviously Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. So there are people that sometimes message me on those. You can message me through there. You can follow me at Tony Vargas NE on Instagram, Tony Vargas NE at Facebook, or at Tony Vargas on Twitter. We remain pretty active on all of them, and they're different platforms as a result. But you can also, if you want to get in touch with me legislatively, you go to tvargas@leg.ne.gov. And that is my email address, my public email address. I tell people if there are issues that are coming up or things that you think are important for me to be educated about, that can drive some of the legislation we work on for January. And hopefully, should I get reelected, and that's the goal here over the next several months, is to continue to, now that we're done with session, to get right back into the campaign. It's getting back out there to the community. So if anybody's also interested in learning more about or the legislative process, I'm happy to talk to them. But if you're also interested in talking about campaign life, I know Terrell knows what it's like. I'm also in the midst of a campaign, and I got to make sure people know what I stand for still, and the work that I've done these last couple of years. And so follow me on those different social media so that you can see what I'm working on. And you'll probably see pictures of my wife and my daughter Ava, and my family, and just a little bit more about me in general too. So.
Okay, thank you. And for everybody that's watching, thank you for tuning in. If you haven't, make sure you visit my website, peopleforterrellmckinney.com. You can learn more about me, some of the issues that I'll be fighting for in the legislature, and you can sign up to vote, sign up for our newsletter, and you can also donate to our campaign. And if you ever have any questions, I'll try to be as accessible. How you doing?
Say hey, man. She's in this.
Thank you a lot.
Really love to wave to people. Hey Terrell, I appreciate you. I appreciate you running, and we need voices that are connected to the community. And I'm glad that you're doing things like this. It shows your character, and I appreciate you, man. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. No problem. Have a good night.
Take care, man.
You too.